Okay, good evening. The board has just been in executive session, so I would like a motion from someone to leave executive and enter public. Can I have that motion?
So motioned.
Thank you, Pat. And a second?
Second.
Who is that? Who was my
Heather,
second?
I think.
Sorry, Heather.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Okay, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills at which formal action may be taken. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending its normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting a virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted on the district website. The Board of Education meeting format was discussed in all committee meetings last week. The consensus is that until the indoor meeting capacity is increased, we will continue to meet via Zoom so that a consistent forum, structure, and rhythm can be achieved while allowing for wider public participation. A reminder to you all that this meeting and all of our public meetings are recorded. Ginny, can you take a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Cooper?
Here.
Mrs. Frenda?
Here.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Ms. Nathans?
Here.
Mrs. Santoro?
Here.
Mrs. Tober?
Here.
Ms. Virtue?
Here.
Mrs. Rye?
Here.
And Mrs. Lees?
Here. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ginny, correspondence? None.
We do not have any this evening.
Okay. Then we're ready for the report of the superintendent, Dr. Dempsey.
All right, good evening, everybody. Is Marley Beers here by any chance? There she is. Marley, you're going to be up first. Marley is our middle school representative, you will remember. Marley, I think you're muted. There you go.
My name is Marley Beers, and I'm currently an 8th grader at BMS. I'm going to tell you about how this crazy year has been a success so far and what some of the new things we are doing at the middle school to make it as normal as possible. Starting off, I would like to talk a little bit about how I personally think the school year is going. For me, the school year is as good as it can get during this time. Going to school twice a week has been working very well for both me and my friends. We are looking forward to adding the 3rd day during marking period 2. Going to school until 12:20 is definitely working. Even with our mask breaks, it's a long time to wear a mask from 8 to 12:20. Talking to a lot of my friends made me realize that they feel the same way because they also think it would be very hard to wear masks much longer. October is election month at BMS. I've been a student council member since 5th grade, and this year, unfortunately because of the coronavirus, we cannot do in-person campaigning and speeches in school as we would normally do. I attended a virtual workshop this fall through the NJASC and talked about what being an executive board member means and how to do the job best for my school. There are about 45 other schools represented at this conference. We went into smaller breakout rooms and talked about how, with the other virtual schools, how we would be able to hold elections and campaign. Because of all of our incredible staff, we were able to do virtual campaigning and virtual speeches. We started this process October 5th. I am running for executive board, and I have already created my poster and my speech video and submitted it to our student council supervisor, Ms. O'Halloran. It was one of the easiest things I've been able to do during the pandemic. All I did was create a Google slide, share it to her, and I was all set to go. As far as the video, when I emailed it to Ms. O'Halloran, I was able to find out very shortly after that my video was approved. Our elections will be held next week, and all students will be able to vote online through Google Form. By doing this all virtually, students in grade 5 through 8 are able to vote for all positions, not just the ones running from their grade. It also gives the 5th grade an opportunity to participate like they have not before. We have more students running this year than we ever had at BMS. I think this is because our students see how student council can really make a difference for them and their friends. This means the school, the environment, and our community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marley. It's good to hear you and hear about how wonderful your year is going. We know it's been a difficult one, so we're always happy to hear about those successes. I'm not sure if Lucy Taylor is here. Lucy, are you here as well? I know she had a soccer game and she was worried about time. There she is.
Back. So, hello, I am Lucy Taylor, a senior at Bernards High and this year's Board of Education student representative for the high school. And we are officially kicking into the 2020 school year, so that is exciting. Thank you to everyone who has helped make this year happen. Many things have happened in the past few weeks. We recently just wrapped up elections for each grade and student body earlier this week. We have some great people as class officers, and I'm really, really excited to see what they're going to work on this year. Seniors have begun scheduling their senior portraits, and senior privileges are hopefully on the way, so that's something for us to look forward to. Sports are going really, really well, and we are all so thankful we can play. Unfortunately, we lost tonight, but next time. Football won against Governor Livingston Saturday night, 34-7. I heard it was a great game. Also on Saturday, boys soccer beat Hunterdon Central 1-0, and Hunterdon Central is ranked 6th in the state while we're 10th. So that's really something that's huge. Cross country has a meet tomorrow. I've heard they've been doing extremely well too. Field hockey is 3-5 and they're having fun just getting out on the field, and they have a great connection this year. Tennis is doing great as well, and girls soccer had a great overtime win against North Plainfield last week, and we also are having fun and excited to get out and play each day. So clubs have recently starting up. It was a slower start because of, starting off purely virtual, but slowly they're just getting back into the groove of things. Peer leaders are starting to regularly meeting with their freshman groups every Wednesday, and it is going great, even over Zoom. A lot of the groups have been working really well with each other, and like the bonds between upperclassmen and underclassmen have been getting really well. Key Club had their first meeting last week, and club advertising has begun on each grade's Google Classroom page. The virtual fall drama is going to get approved Wednesday, so that is extremely exciting that we are able to do that. Harvard Model Congress has gone all virtual, and applications have begun. I know a lot of people look forward to that throughout the year, so that's also something we can all look forward to. Math League is getting approved Wednesday, and National Honor Society has begun peer tutoring. If students need help in a subject, they can be matched with an NHS student that will help tutor them. Next week is Spirit Week for the high school. The week accumulates also with Halloween costumes on Friday and a potential costume contest. So start planning your costumes now. In-person school it's going great. Now that we're a couple weeks in, people are more accustomed to the in-person school after 6 months of virtual instruction and summer. And I think students and teachers are both starting to get in a very smooth and productive routine of how hybrid class should be run, which is really, really good. Granted, there are times where in-person school does get lonely, but we can only be thankful we get the opportunity to have a semi-regular school year. The 12-15 school days have been working great as well. I've asked many people across different grades, even asking my peer leader group and like the freshmen in it, how they like this early dismissal. And they've all said that they've loved it. It gives students the opportunity to work with their teachers, and it gives teachers the time to work with us, whether it's a review session, homework help, or simply a couple extra minutes to finish teaching a class. So that's really is extremely helpful. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. It's always great to hear from students. I think, the board has worked so hard, the administration has worked hard, and certainly your teachers are working hard each and every day. And so to hear that things feel even a little bit normal in this crazy world is good for us. So thank you for that, sweetie. I am certainly happy to report that the 2021 school year continues uninterrupted. We are continually working to increase opportunities for students to safely spend time in our buildings. Our September meeting was only 3 short weeks ago, yet in that time we have increased in-person instruction in a number of ways. Virtual Mondays at Bedwell were replaced by Mondays serving alternating cohorts on the 5th of October, and a similar change will take place at the middle school and high school at the start of the second marking period. We have some small groups who currently attend school 5 days a week, and we're working with our district physician to devise a plan for Bedwell's youngest learners to similarly increase their time in school after the winter break. So while the constraints of room size and social distancing have not changed, trust that the district is committed to slowly and safely expanding in-person instruction to the greatest degree practical. While we want nothing more than greater time in school, we are balancing this against New Jersey's regional data, which currently has all counties in the state at a moderate level of COVID, higher than we were when we started school. We must all remain vigilant. Moving forward, we heard about sports. Our athletic director is currently devising plans for winter sports, and he will be presenting his recommendations directly to board committees in the upcoming weeks to ensure that we have a carefully considered plan for that season. We certainly all recognize that this year is unlike any other, and that none of this would be possible without our teachers. The virtual back to school nights proved this without question. And we're grateful to parents for their positive feedback. The principals have certainly shared emails with me that they have received. Parents who have said, we're so incredibly lucky to have teachers like you and be part of this amazing school family. We're so amazed at the work you, the teachers, and the staff have done to make this school year the best it can be. My son loves his in-person days, and remote learning has gotten easier as the year has gone on. People have been so impressed, have voiced that, with the efforts of the teaching staff to navigate the challenges of the hybrid model. Just yesterday, I received an email that commented upon the truly outstanding job that the team has done over these past weeks, providing all Somerset Hills students a safe, secure place to learn and grow. This parent said that back over the summer, the tasks seemed daunting, but we stepped up, we didn't blink, we battled on, and we proved that the naysayer in this particular parent was wrong. So I do feel like we're getting there. For the second marking period, so far, the data is just coming in about parents who are opting to switch, and we have more parents who are currently virtual who are abandoning that and coming in for a hybrid model than we do parents who are opting for the reverse. Trust that the administration continues to have ongoing communication with teacher leadership to discuss and address needs and concerns. We collaboratively met to work through what classroom observations will look like in this new world. Our pandemic response teams continue to meet in all the buildings, and our building leadership is working with the tech department to ensure that staff concerns are addressed. Colleen has done a great job of reaching out to teachers to solicit feedback on their professional development wants and needs. We're running PDIs on platforms like Formative and Nearpod and Pear Deck. And Colleen has arranged for drop-in meetings between teachers and the tech to facilitate more of an ongoing dialogue as we move forward. And certainly we're thankful for the kind gestures our HSAs have bestowed on teachers. So is any of this perfect? No, not at all, but we are definitely moving forward. In keeping with that notion of moving forward, this evening we have Mr. Catelli here, one of our supervisors. He has a presentation that he worked on that was originally planned for last spring. It sat on the shelf for about 6 months, and the data has not been updated yet for 2021. But we thought that in our commitment to continue normalizing school days and the business of running schools, it was important to share this presentation with the board and the public. This is something that was shared with the curriculum committee back before COVID. So, Mr. Catelli, it's all you. Take it away. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I'm waiting for the presentation to get loaded up. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I am the District Social Studies, World Language, and ESL Supervisor, and today I'm here to talk to us all about our English as a Second Language program throughout all the different schools. So as Dr. Dempsey mentioned, this was put together back in March, and we are currently in the process of gathering, updating, and kind of putting all of our new data into our systems. So the data we have in here is from March. Though a lot has changed with schools since March, we're still providing a lot of the same services to our students. We're still working with all of our ESL students, and the estimates we're seeing is the numbers are fairly similar. So at some point, I may come back and do some updates on the data that I'm talking about here, but overall, we're giving a big picture of the program and some of the trends. So next slide. So overall, what I'm going to talk about tonight in the next 20 or so minutes is an introduction of who are our students, what are our numbers, how do we identify an ESL student, how do we exit an ESL student, what happens when you're in that category. I'll move into talking about the programs that we have to meet those students and what kind of, what kind of instruction and classes we offer when you're in that designation, and then what extra supports do we give students? What do we have outside of those classes to make sure that students get as much support as they need when they are an ESL student? So before we jump into all of that though, next slide, I want to talk about some key vocabulary, some key terms. So one of the things we always work with our teachers to do is making sure that that key vocabulary, new terms for our Ls, is clear for them. Something that they're going to hear in the lesson and say, I haven't heard that one before. I want to do that with all of you today too. You're going to hear me bring up a lot of these terms over and over again. So two that will come up a lot are WIDA and Access 2.0. WIDA is a national consortium of states that provides services like lessons, strategies, and assessments for working with English language learners. And one of the assessments that is used is Access 2.0. That's a New Jersey mandated test. A lot of other states mandate it as well, but in the early spring, every ESL student in the state of New Jersey takes the Access 2.0, and that's used to assess, has a student reached an English language proficiency, to jump down a little bit, the ELP, have they reached an English language proficiency to be able to exit the program? I'll give you some examples of what access scores and reports look like and how we use that data and how we track it a little bit later. You'll also hear me use the phrase SLIFE, which stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. That's a student that missed 3 or more years of formal education in their former country and their former school. So there's students who are coming in multiple years without multiple years of education. And I'll talk about how we design programs to support those students. I'll also use the phrase sheltered instruction a lot, and you may have heard this as SIOP. Sheltered instruction is strategies that we train teachers in. It's a 3-day training on how to support ESL students in a general ed classroom. A lot of people ask, where does sheltered come from? Why are we calling this sheltered instruction? Back in the 1980s, when this strategy, when this training really came out, it was very, very common across the nation for ESL students to be sheltered in one classroom and not move into general education classrooms. So the idea is it's sheltered instruction to bring them out of that sheltered environment. You'll see these strategies in their math class, their history class, their science class. And SIOP is the Pearson brand of it. So we do sheltered instruction. We don't employ the SIOP strategies, but you'll sometimes hear people just refer to them back and forth. And I want to make sure that designation is clear. Like I said, English language proficiency is a scale I'm going to talk about that access measures, where we say at what point from not knowing the language at all to fluent is an ESL student. And then 2 requirements from the New Jersey Department of Ed that I'll talk a lot about are a bilingual waiver and 3-year plan. This is kind of a reporting that we do to the state. Bilingual waiver is annually, 3-year plan is, I think you guessed it, every 3 years, where we kind of report back on our goals, plans, and how we're doing with everything. Next slide. So before we jump into our programs and the supports we give our students, one of the most important things to talk about is who are our students and how do we identify them? And again, I want to make sure this is super clear. All the data that I'm presenting is very specific and it's from early March. We're obviously always tracking and updating, but this is March data. I don't want anyone to go saying, you know, this is from this exact day. It's from a couple months ago, but we're always updating. Next slide. So when every single family registers, they fill out the registration form, and built into that is the home language survey. If you mark that you speak another language, listen to another language at home, if your child grew up hearing another language, there's multiple questions that ask about what languages are used at home. Pretty much, if a language other than English is marked in any of those, it triggers a screening in ESL. So the ESL department doesn't step in until after registration is complete. But in that registration, if it's marked that another language is used in some way, then we need to screen that student according to federal and state guidelines. We need to see, well, let's test what their proficiency is, because we're hearing that you use another language at home. And this is a breakdown of our district. What languages are typically used in homes within our district? Next slide. So based on that data, you can see we're predominantly English. We have a large Spanish-speaking population and a lot of other language included in there, but it means 19% of students here use another language at home or in addition to English. And I know that sentence sounds a little weird, but that is the definition of how we're looking when we're determining if we need to screen a student or not. It's saying that you use only another language at home, or maybe you use English and another language. Our bilingual students get screened as well. If a student is using English and French at home, or English and Spanish at home, we also want to screen them to make sure that they are getting the proper supports. We want to make sure that every single student who's, like I said, hearing, using another language at home, that we're checking if the supports we offer are appropriate for this student. Next slide. So what do those numbers look like within our district? So as of March 2020, I always put that little asterisk there were 352 students enrolled in the district who hear or use a language other than English. All of these students were marked for screening services. So this is kind of that first group that we are saying, all right, on that home language survey, you completed it, we have it, we need to just give you a quick screening exam. There are screening exams from WIDA. They're essentially a shorter version of the access. They kind of give us a yes, no, more or less, of do you need ESL services or not. So of those 352, those students are screened, and as of March 1st, 134 of those students were enrolled in our K-12 ESL program. Based on that access information, based on that WIDA screening information, we said these 134 students need the services that we offer within our ESL program. And the question always comes up, how long will a student be in an ESL program? This is probably one of the few times you're ever really going to pin me down to give a range. It's expected 3 to 5 years, but I always really do try to say every student is really on their own journey. It's very hard to say 3 to 5 years alone. Some students are only in for a year or two. They just need a little bit extra refining of their language. Some students will need multiple years beyond. Some students may need all 5. Some may go to 6 years, 7 years, and need some extra supports. But in general, you'll see students exit the ESL program in around 3 to 5 years. And I will talk a little bit about what exiting looks like, what is the criteria criteria we use and supports we offer after that. So 134 students were enrolled as of March, but what does that look like over the past few years? Has that number remained consistent, increased, decreased? Next slide, please. We can see in this graph, the number has increased over the past 10 years. It's broken up by our 3 different schools. You can see Bedwell is the blue, orange is BMS, and gray is BHS. So it's kind of stacking them together so you can see the increase over the past years. So as we look at this, you start to see in 2013, 2014, where there was an increase at the high school, and then moving through the different, moving through Bedwell and throughout the different schools. This leads to an increase in the services we offer. This leads into us looking at our programs. Are we offering the proper classes we have based on our student enrollment? Do we need to train teachers differently? Do we, like I said, need to offer extra supports? Do we need to look at different ways we access and manage our data? As we look at the students we have, we're constantly reflecting on what are we offering, and is it proper for the students that we have? And this is one of the reasons we've seen an increase in ESL staff, as we've had an increase in ESL students and an increase in ESL services as well. So next slide. So up until this point, I've kind of just been using a broad term of they're an ESL student. They're kind of either, I'm kind of referring to a binary of like yes, no at this point. But I really want to make a clear designation of not all ESL students are the same level. It's not really a yes, no sort of thing. There is a wide spectrum that I'm going to talk about. It's a little bit from that access data and then can even be broken down more from there. There's a lot of different kind of levels of what we consider an ESL student. And when we screen them, we're not just looking at their English proficiency, but we're looking at their schooling background as well. So one of the questions on this slide, every time somebody saw it was, okay, so there's a cup of tea there, what is this for? One of the best activities we always do in training staff about ESL, it's a very common one across sheltered instruction practices, is called the tea activity. Normally when we do this in person, they're standing up, sitting down. We can all just play at home at this point. Play in your imagination. Maybe you can raise your hand. I have a couple of screens, so if you raise your hand, maybe I'll judge by like the 4 screens that I can see here. So it's just some simple questions to help us understand different supports and different kind of levels of ESL students. So first one, it's not a trick question whatsoever. How many people know how to make a cup of tea? Do you know how to make a cup of tea? I certainly do. I imagine most people do. I saw a lot of nodding and yes, of course. So that's kind of the content that we're talking about. So we're saying you have the content of knowing how to make a cup of tea. How many people could explain in another language with some supports, explain quickly how to make a cup of tea in a language other than English? I'm not going to test you. I'm not going to make you speak it to me. I'm not going to make you make a cup of tea. But if you had maybe a dictionary, maybe a friend who could clarify some stuff, you had some sentence stems that would help you in another language saying, first you should blank, second you should blank. Those are supports that we can provide to our students that can help some students who have an understanding of English after we've worked with them for a little bit, or maybe they've come in from a country or a school where they were studying English already. Those are supports that we can give them to help bring them a little bit further. And the last kind of T question is, how many people in another language without any support could write a 5-paragraph essay? I certainly couldn't. And everybody I can see on my screen is shaking their head no, saying that they would not be able to. But everybody who I saw shaking their head no raised their hand in the beginning saying that, yes, well, I know how to make a cup of tea. I just can't produce a 5-paragraph essay in another language on making a cup of tea. And this is kind of where an ESL program might step in, working with content area teachers, and how are we kind of modifying our classes for students. You knew the content that we may be assessing in that cup of tea class, but the language was a bit of a barrier for you demonstrating it. How can we help a student demonstrate their knowledge in another way? So an ESL program is way more than just the class with the ESL teacher where, you know, they might be pulled out to get some instruction at Bedwell, or they may go for 1 or 2 classes at the middle school. It is every class, and honestly, everybody at a school. We're all working to support our students in different ways, and we're figuring out the right accommodations to provide them in their classes and the right modifications to make in classes to help support them. Now, the only thing I don't necessarily like about the tea activity is it's taking content that's pretty easy for everybody. I feel like most of us know how to make a cup of tea and we don't have to think about it. One of the terms I introduced in the beginning was SLIFE, student with limited interrupted formal education. When we're talking about some of our high school courses, and we're talking about like 9th grade courses, algebra, biology, world history, those are requiring almost 9 years, 10 years of schooling background to be able to be successful in those courses. So if we have a student with interrupted or limited education, a lot of accommodations and modifications may still not be able to make them successful in those classes right off the bat. We might need to do a little bit more support for them, and that's something I'm going to talk about. But to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about again with this level and where students are in their ESL journey within the district, take a look at the next slide, which I'm going to caution you is a pretty complicated graph, and I'm going to explain it. This is by far the most complicated graph I'm going to show. So as of March, this is a breakdown of every single grade in the district and how long the ESL students in that grade have been in the district. So have been receiving ESL services. I'm going to clarify myself there. Have been receiving ESL services, including in other districts. There are some students who may have come to us and have been receiving ESL services in a district for a year or two. They are those years are shown in here. A student who is, received 2 years in another district would be a third-year student here. So what you're seeing is the dark blue, students who just arrived under 3 months before March. The orange students are the students who arrived or in their first year. Let's look at kindergarten, first and second grade right in the beginning. I think that's kind of clear and makes sense. So kindergarten is predominantly orange because the students are in their first year. They're kindergartners. They had just begun their ESL journey. The second year students are gray. That's why first grade has almost all gray there, because there's the majority of those students are in their second year in first grade, and there's one new student down there who just joined. They're in first grade and they're in their first year of ESL. Third year is yellow. So again, second grade is getting a couple different colors in there where you're seeing more yellow in third grade. There's the second grade, they're in their third year, but there's still some new students in their first year and even within the past few months. And then third grade is moving into that blue. You're seeing, again, a couple other colors of orange and blue as new students are coming in. But also pay attention to the kindergarten, first, second, third grade, kind of seeing that trend down that I was talking about of you're within the program for 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years. You're starting to see students leaving the program within 3 to 5 years. The thing that does catch a lot of people's eyes very quickly is 9th grade. You see a lot of students who are orange and who are that dark blue, students who are their first year or under 3 months. Those are traditionally the SLIFE students that I was talking about. Within the district, though they may not still be in their first year, there are 68, as of March 1st, 2020, there were 68 students who were classified as SLIFEs. There were 68 students who generally in BMS and largely at BHS arrived from a place where they didn't have the opportunity to go to school, they weren't allowed to go to school, it wasn't afforded to them, and they arrived in our district with multiple years of gaps in their education. So when I talk about our programs, you're going to see me speak about that group. In particular, remember that 9th grade where we're seeing about 25 kids as of March who were within their first year of ESL education in 9th grade. And think back to that T activity of what kind of supports would we need to give those students to make sure that they can be successful. But again, this gives you a breakdown of where are the students and where are we seeing the students in the program for the longest and kind of how long are kids staying in the program. Next slide. So how do we measure if someone's going to stay in the program? How does someone get to their third year, fourth year? How does somebody stay in? Mentioned in the beginning that every single ESL student in the state of New Jersey takes in the early spring the Access 2.0, which is produced by that organization, WIDA. It's a computer-based test in addition to the state exams. So this is in addition to NJ SLA, it does not replace it. And it's another test for ESLs students, and it measures their reading, writing, speaking, and listening. There's multiple components where our elementary students may see an image like this, and there may be a conversation between two people, and they have to kind of explain what they're seeing in the picture. And they earn a better score based on how much vocabulary, English vocabulary they use, different kind of statements, you know, the difference between, what do you see in the picture? I see a boy, I see a girl. If you say, if there's an explanation that's a little more in depth of, I see a boy and a girl working together. I see a boy and a girl working together to help the environment. These are going to be things that'll move somebody up kind of on that WIDA scale. So what do the scores look like? Next slide. This is a report, a sample one, albeit, of WIDA results. Students are scored on a 1 to 6 scale in listening, speaking, reading, writing. Then there's kind of a composite score for oral language, a composite score for literacy, for comprehension, and then the overall one is the one we use for exiting students. So it kind of takes listening, speaking, reading, writing, those scores, brings them together, and that's their overall score. There's a little bit of calculation in there, and that determines if they exit. A 1 is typically very little to no English, 6 is fluent. A student may exit the program at a 4.5. I want to reiterate that because sometimes people make some assumptions. The 6 is fluent, but we are allowed to exit students at a 4.5. So when a student exits, they may not be fully fluent in English, but that 4.5 is a state cutoff that's provided by the state of New Jersey, and our staff works to provide measures and determine is it appropriate to exit this student at that point. But we are saying the services provided by the ESL department may not be the most appropriate measure, may not be the most appropriate cup of tea kind of to help the student continue growing in English. There are supports that can be provided in classrooms, and as we kind of monitor with teachers, we will continue to see that student grow. But after they exit the program, they will not continue to have this access test, but they'll be monitored in other ways. So as of March 1st, 2020, there were 39 students in the district who had exited the program. Some of them may have exited a year before that, and we're still being monitored to see. Some of them may be in high school and they exited in elementary school. It's a full spectrum that we're kind of monitoring and seeing within our district. So next slide. So what does this look like overall? What do we see? How do we kind of track access scores? In general, what are we seeing across a class? So what are our current 4th graders? But this is their 3rd grade at this time. This is an overall track of their access scores. And again, you see that nice trend upwards over the years. You can see in 2nd grade, there's some of the dots there, and then they don't have 3rd grade estimated scores because they exited. And you can see around that 4.5, we're estimating some of the students would be able to exit, but you also see down around 2nd grade, some new students enroll, and then in their 2nd year of the program, their scores are beginning that trajectory up on their composite score, on their overall score. But we use not just the overall score, we use all the different pieces, that reading, writing, speaking, listening, to determine the appropriate supports for student. And we're setting up goals for the students using that information, and we're kind of targeting how we support them based on all of that. But we're monitoring students constantly, and this gives you, like I said, an idea of the growth you're seeing overall throughout the years. We measure them at enrollment, their access score in kindergarten. In 1st grade, you're seeing that trend up. Some students are exiting 2nd grade, some are going to exit 3rd grade. Like I said, 3 to 5 years, but everybody's on their own journey. Some students are finishing earlier, some students might need a little extra time, depending on where they are. But that should give us a good understanding of how does somebody get into the program, how does somebody exit the program, kind of what are we measuring and how are we assessing our Ls during the year. So to go to the next slide, what programs do we offer? It's different at every school, and we do the best we can to meet the different needs of the students. Next slide. One of the things I always try to think about is, what does the student want? What does the student need? And what programs meet both? And that's just the way I think of, it's kind of a quick way of saying, we are doing our best to constantly assess what we need and look at who our student population is, what level are our students performing at? Do we need to adjust something if we're not seeing the growth we want to see? Or if we're seeing students come in who are largely SLIFE, we adjusted our program to meet that because we had students who wanted something different, needed something different. We added extra after-school programs to support our students when we realized there were different needs to get to the students. So the next few slides will be a breakdown of the different schools and what they're offering. Next slide. So at Bedwell, the students are in their classrooms, their kindergarten, first, second grade classrooms, and they will receive pull-out English support. We do our best to make that support around their English language proficiency, sometimes based on specials and stuff like that. It's tough to get all of the students who may be the same English language proficiency at the same time. But generally, we try to get small groups so the teacher can support them and work with those groups around their English proficiency, but also try to help them grow based on the goals that we're setting for them. And we're doing our best to link it to the classroom work to support those students. And year by year, we're working through training different cohorts of teachers in sheltered instruction. So they're getting pull-out ESL support. And then when they're in their classrooms, we're training different grade teachers on the modifications and strategies to support those students when they're in their classroom for the TC time, for math time, to help the students at that point. Next slide. At the middle school, students receive a double block of ESL support daily. So they have 2 periods. One period is ESL instruction and the other one is a support period. During that support period, they'll be going over some of the content classes that they're in. So an ESL student will be in this ESL period, but also be in a math class, a science class, and a history class. And during this support period, they may be going over with their ESL teacher, all right, let's talk about what you're doing in your social studies class at this point. What's vocabulary that might be new to you? What's the concepts that we need to review? How are you doing in your math class? Let's review the vocabulary in there. And then the content areas as well, the area teachers there as well are also receiving that sheltered instruction training. We're trying to get as many teachers as possible over the years sheltered instruction training to support, so they have the strategies and resources kind of in their toolkit to support our ESL students. Next slide. At the high school, you'll see some different programs. You'll see that sheltered instruction again, and that 2 periods of support, but we have a special newcomer cohort. So when we screen students and we see that they are SLIFEs, we are saying you might not have the schooling background to be able to go into the standard 9th grade courses. You might not have the schooling background to be able to go into algebra, biology, world history. And we have classes for the students that work on, kind of almost consider a crash course of academic language and concepts in math, science, and social studies. So you're getting the students a year of support, explaining to them and working not only on their English skills, but the area content skills before we're moving them into those content courses. So our SLIFE's freshman year is many times a special cohort where they're getting that not only introduction to English and core English, but core content that they're going to need to be successful in math. We introduced this maybe 4 or 5 years ago at this point, because when we had SLIFE students before this, they were not able to succeed in their 9th grade courses. And we went back to that. What do they want? What do they need? How do we get it to them? They have 2 periods of ESL during the day. They'll have all students will have an ESL period and that same kind of support class where they will bring in the work from their algebra class, their world history class, and receive that support. And at the high school, in the first 2 content courses, there is an ESL push-in teacher who will go into an Algebra 1 class where there are SLIFEs that are in their 2nd year and work with those students and kind of helping them structure that academic English vocabulary for algebra to support them. So not only are they getting the year of kind of introductory math first before going into algebra, we have an algebra teacher who's trained in sheltered instruction and an ESL teacher pushing in to support the students in different strategies to make sure they can be successful in those courses. And we're very proud to say over the years, we've seen multiple students graduate who have arrived with many, many years gaps, multiple years of schooling gaps, be able to graduate and meet all the standards of the state of New Jersey, pass the state required tests, pass all the required courses to be able to graduate. Next slide. So beyond within our own district, there are a lot of other programs we use to kind of evaluate our programs. As I kind of kept saying, you know, we're always looking at the students who enroll and how they're doing to determine what programs we offer. But the NJDOE requires a bilingual waiver annually and a 3-year plan every 3 years. The bilingual waiver is based on a requirement that's in code that says if there are 20 students who speak the same language in your ESL program, you're required to provide a full bilingual program for them, unless you submit a waiver that gets approved by the NJDOE explaining and supported by data from the district, here's what we're doing instead, here's what we're doing in place of that based on this information to support their needs. So an example of when I submit our bilingual waiver, I'm saying, here's our newcomer program. We are saying that's what we're doing to meet needs that would not be a full bilingual program for students, but rather a newcomer year. And a 3-year plan is an evaluation of here's how things have been going in the past, here's where we want to move our program, here's what we're going to change and what we're looking at to continue to grow our program and meet the needs of our students. So not only internally are we doing this sort of stuff, we're working with the NJDOE constantly to make sure we are reflecting on our information. And one thing I'm going to talk about at the end is we've recently implemented a program this year called Elevation. It's an online data program for ESL data, and that's going to help us be able to track even better the progress of our students, work with our teachers to make sure that modifications, accommodations are clear, and we can really monitor and track our student progress. So this is a little bit of a summary of the programs we offer, but what about the extra supports? Next slide. So every school has extra supports, kind of either extra programs during the school day or extra programs outside the school day that we offer. And I particularly want to highlight 2 programs at Bedwell, if I can. Next slide. They definitely look a little bit different, looked differently this year due to COVID restrictions, but we have summer programs for our Bedwell students and an after-school SOAR program that's launching next week for our Bedwell students. So the summer program we run is with our Title III funds, which is provided to us from the federal government for our ESL students. We do a program for the students who registered for kindergarten and marked that they used or hear another language at home, where we are bringing them in over the summer. This did not happen this year. Obviously, we did not bring them into the school, but in the past, we bring them into the school, introduce them to school routines, and work with them on some foundational knowledge before they move into kindergarten. We also have a program for K into 1st grade. This year, we did a virtual program for our kindergarten into 1st grade students over the summer to work with them, again, on strategies, vocabulary, and just supporting them in virtual learning. And the SOAR program is for our K-4 ESL Title I students, and we are supporting them in reading, writing, language, math skills. Our teachers work with those students to provide them throughout the year constant support to help them. Next slide. Throughout the district, we have tons of different supports. I'm not going to go in depth in all of these. I could speak forever about all of these different programs. To give you a quick highlight, we work with so many different organizations to support our students at so many different levels. We work with Barnes & Noble to provide nooks to our early elementary students so we can make sure they have reading material at home, an electronic version where it can be read to them in English and Spanish. We work with a local organization, Somerset County organization, Sweet Reads, which is a just fantastic group who just wants to get hard copy books into students' hands, and they provide them for all our grade levels. They provide book bundles throughout the entire school year. We work with the group Middle Earth. Has nothing to do with dwarfs and elves and all that kind of stuff. Their name is interesting. We always joke about it with them. They're another Somerset-based group who has a youth college readiness program, and they help our students who aren't just ESL, but generally our first generation college students. Many are ESL, some are not, and they just help them with college planning and preparing for college. We do sheltered instruction for our staff. We collaborate with RVCC, and we've actually started working with their Latino Student Union to be able to provide supports and kind of mentoring options for our students. And throughout all the grade levels, there are countless ELL workshops through our Teachers College program. There are a lot of good options for teachers, for our ESL teachers to get strategies from there, but also as ESL students exit and move into class, our general ed literacy classes, there's supports in there for them. Next slide. We collaborate with our HSA. We actually have a lot going on this week. Generally, we used to do monthly meetings. We're switching it up a little bit this year based on restrictions and virtual meetings and all that kind of stuff. But in the past, we always had monthly meetings for students where we invited our families to come in, and we would have different speakers, and we would go through different programs. This month, we're actually having meetings in the Sacred Heart Chapel parking lot, outdoors, and we're working with families on a lot of the same topics this week. We were there today until about 3:30, working with students and families on different questions they had and getting information out to them. Next slide. Importantly as well, I do want to point out that, that idea of us constantly using our data, moving forward, we have received a lot of recognition from our program. I'm very proud of the work our teachers do, our general education teachers do, our ESL teachers, all of our support staff, our admin. The entire district has been incredibly supportive of our program, and it's shown. The NJDOE itself has recognized us for the work we've done and asked us to come and talk about our program. Within Somerset County, there are professional organizations like the NJASCD that's asked us to talk about how we support our students. The New Jersey Teachers of English as a Second and Other Language, they have asked us to speak. And just I mentioned there, some of the districts around the state that we've worked with. It's not just within our area, throughout the whole state, other districts have heard about the work we've done and reached out to see what we're doing. And we've housed visits from the majority of those to see how are we supporting our students. So it's nice to see all of that recognition from the work that we've done as an entire team. Next slide. It's not to say that there isn't ways that we want to continue to improve. And that's how we use our student data. We're constantly using that data to determine how we're going to improve, how are we going to change our program, what new services are we going to offer, what other things are we going to do. We use the data that we're collecting to determine student placement. We're using it to determine supporting students who are in the same grade but at different ELPs. That's that idea of, you remember that chart I showed with the student scores over the years? When we have third graders who are close to exiting, but third graders who also just recently enrolled, they're at different points in their journey. They're at different English language proficiencies. We're going to use that data to determine what's the proper supports for them. We use it, especially when we do our 3-year plan, to look at multi-year analysis of are the systems, the programs we're using, and the supports we're offering working. And then we also use it to monitor our exited students and see how they are doing, and are they receiving the support they're getting after they exit the program. And I just want to speak briefly about that elevation program that I have. It's going to help us bring all of this data together. It's going to help us see it in an easier way. And probably the most important thing is it's going to be able to make it so much easier to share and get this information out to all of our staff, particularly our classroom teachers. I think that's one of the best areas for growth. I think that's one of the areas we really need to see, is making sure that we're working with our general education teachers to understand what supports are we offering, to work together with the ESL teacher, maybe reading support teacher, or any other teacher who's working with them, to say, here are the goals for the student. We're all aiming in the same direction. And I really do think this elevation program that will start being rolled out this year to our teachers is going to give us the proper platform and the best way to make that clear for all of the teachers, and make it very manageable too, because we want to make sure that it's clear of what we're doing to support our students and working, but we also want to make sure it's in a user-friendly way. And we do think this will make that very achievable for our district. Over probably in the future, at some point, I'll talk with curriculum committee or give a quick presentation on it. We're still uploading our information and preparing everything there. But at that point, the last slide, that hopefully is a quick introduction. I know I went through a lot, probably went a little bit over the 20 minutes that I promised I would take, but that's like I said, a quick introduction to who our students are, how we determine students who are in our program, the supports we offer within the school day and supports we offer outside the school day. So I don't know how we normally do questions at these, but I'm happy to take any to whatever forum we want to do.
Does the board have any questions that they'd like to ask Michael? Certainly, if members of the public have them, you can email mcatelli@shsd.org. This presentation will be posted. Michael, I'm so grateful for your time and hard work around this, and I think you made it clear that this focus on developing programs based on data, what is observable, what we record, how we track, and how we work towards continuously improving the ways in which we serve our students. I think that came across, so thank you for that. If the board has questions, certainly they can ask Michael. Other than that, that would conclude my report once we're through with this.
Yeah, hi, I just wanted to jump in a second. First of all, thank you for that presentation. It was excellent. And I just want to also thank you for working and developing this program. It's obvious that we have a robust student-focused program that has grown and adapted over the years. So I'm so impressed with that. The one question I have, just confirm for me. So our English language learners, they are taking our standardized PARC testing in a year. Obviously, we didn't have that testing last year, but in a normal year, they're taking that standardized PARC test as well, right? In addition to the assessments that they're getting through the ESL program.
That is correct. And thank you for the compliments.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Are the students taking, they're taking that access test, and they also are taking the NJ SLA exams. They are taking both of those related to the courses that they are in.
NJ SLA, Heather, is the rebranded PARC, New Jersey, sort of.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I mean, that's really, I think it's an interesting point to bear that. So a student can come in freshman year having, I'm going back to my acronyms, being a slight, and then have to take PARC testing at the end of that first year of their programming.
Yes, for certain courses they would. It depends a little bit on the math course they're in. If they're not in Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2, they might not, but they would for English, and then the next year they certainly would. For their
and there is some brief period of time where their scores may not count, if you will.
Yes.
But when Michael talks about this 3 to 5 year average, certainly that is not, those two numbers don't dovetail. So generally it's for, I believe, about a year that their time in school would not count toward our aggregate performance on those standardized tests.
Okay. Thank you. And again, thank you. This is a great presentation and really good information. Thank you to everybody working on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Michael, thank you so much. That was a very interesting and thorough presentation.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, Gretchen, you're finished with yours? Okay, we're now going to have a public hearing for the refunding of a 2012 bond. This will be facilitated by Lisa A. Gorab from Willens, Goldman & Spitzer of Woodbridge, and Robbie Akampora of Phoenix Advisors of Bordentown, New Jersey. They're going to give us a presentation on this, and we can then have a discussion. Lisa?
Would you like me to go? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you again. The board has a resolution in front of it this evening that essentially does two things. It adopts on second reading a refunding bond ordinance, number one. And number two, authorizes the issuance of refunding bonds subject to certain parameters. Why is the board taking this action? In 2012, the board issued bonds to refund and refinance earlier bonds for the purpose of interest savings. So rates had dropped in 2012, and the board was able to refinance their bonds like you would refinance a mortgage. Currently, interest rates are at a level that would enable the board to refinance their bonds yet again, like a mortgage, refinancing it again. And this action you take tonight would allow the board to do that. The action does not authorize an extension of maturity. The bonds would still be paid off in the same time. The bonds that are proposed to be refinanced are the callable portion of those 2012 bonds, which is about $13,065,000. And those bonds mature in year 2023 to 2029. Those bonds could be called or paid off early in 2022 on a tax-exempt basis. There are several different options that this resolution gives the board to refinance the debt in light of current interest rate environments and tax code requirements. But that is the action that will be considered tonight. In order to adopt that refunding ordinance, the board is required to hold a public hearing specifically on the refunding, at which board members or members of the public could ask any questions about the proposed refinancing. I don't know if you want Robbie to go over the numbers or if you'd like to take comments at this point.
I can give you a summary of where we are. Earlier when we started this process, a number of districts and places around the country, frankly, were issuing taxable bonds. And generally, taxable bonds have higher interest rates than tax-exempt bonds. The bonds that the district always issues and municipalities always issues are tax-exempt bonds. They're, tax-free from with income tax. And up until this year, frankly, we always refunded tax-exempt bonds with tax-exempt bonds. The taxable rates dropped so much this year that we were able to refinance tax-exempt bonds with these taxable bonds. Even though the rates were slightly higher, they were almost as low as the tax-exempt bonds. So when we started this process, we were suggesting that we do these as taxable bonds. And the resolution that is authorizing is allowing us to do either. In the last few weeks, the taxable bonds have started to flood the market, and the market for these taxable bonds has gone away slightly. So the savings are not as good as they were before, but the district's in a position to refund these using tax-exempt bonds with a closing of December of 2021. Time is ticking, and we may just hold off. I'm frankly holding off on all of my refinancings for another 2 weeks. We don't know what's going to happen after the week of November 3rd. We're not in a position to sell the bonds right now, so we're just in a holding pattern. And we're going to reevaluate things after that and see what the tax-exempt market is and the taxable market is. Just to give you a frame of reference, when we started this process, the tax-exempt savings, which we can't close on until December of 21, were about $1.3 million. The taxable bonds that we spoke with you about, the savings was $1 million. So there was a $300,000 difference, but the situation was that we could close on those taxable bonds today if the rates were holding. So that is what we recommended when we started out here. But as I said a few weeks ago, the taxable bonds, there was not much of an appetite for the taxable bonds in the market. So, we're just getting your approvals tonight. We would not have been able to sell these bonds before tonight. And once we get these approvals, I just want to wait a couple of weeks and then see where the market is and come back with another recommendation and to give to Ginny. Again, we were at $1 million taxable. That was a 7.4% present value savings. The rule of thumb is usually if we can get 3% present value savings, that you should do the refinancing. The tax exempt savings was 10%, but again, we can't achieve that until December of 2021. The third kind of option we have on the side is there are refundings called private placement. Some banks come in, it's not a public offering. It's not, we don't have a rating. We don't have to do an official statement. Some banks are willing to buy these bonds as loans, a private loan, it's a locked in rate, within about 6 months of that call date. So if we get into next March or April, we may be able to do this as tax exempt and then get pretty close to that 1.3 million and still be able to do it that way. So I really just want to be able to monitor the market for a few weeks and keep coming back to Ginny, who can in turn, let you all know what's going on with the market. Any questions?
Can I ask a question? I actually have two, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it. But
Okay.
Can you tell us what the transaction fees are associated with this, if any? And then also,
Sure.
I know you spoke about the pros of moving forward with this. What are the cons, if any?
The cons are if the rates, if we sold the bonds and then the rate dropped even further and we didn't take advantage of the market at that time. But that's a prediction that we can't make. The costs are about $125,000, and the savings that we talk about are net of those costs. If we end up doing this as a private placement, either the taxable or tax exempt, those costs are about the same. If we end up doing it as a private placement, which couldn't happen until later next year, we'd probably save about at least $30,000 because we don't have to get a bond rating and we don't have to print an official statement and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I just have one clarification. So obviously, if we're approving this tonight, if we approve this tonight, this allows us to make a move when it's favorable. And that option is good until when?
Forever. I guess I'll let Lisa answer that. But
Right. All right.
Yes, that resolution is valid going forward. This type of resolution and ordinance. Yes.
Okay. Any other board members have questions? No? Is there any public comment on this? Okay. Thank you for that. That will be voted on in the finance section of the meeting. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Do you need us to stay or you're okay?
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Ginny, I'll get back with you in a week or so. Second week of November, we're going to regroup on everything and see where things are.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, public questions and comments for actionable agenda items. We very much welcome input from the public. Public comments are welcome at this time on any agenda item. Towards the end of the meeting, there is a second public forum on any topic. Please state your name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, but an individual may speak a second time after all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board feels there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. In accordance with New Jersey statute, the board will not discuss matters regarding specific personnel. Public questions and comments will be limited to 30 minutes. Thank you for your input. And I would just like to say that last month, the use of the chat function evolved quite nicely. So I would like to suggest to the public that if you would like to make a comment, to write your name in the chat and I will call on you. You don't have to write the comment in the chat. This worked in a very orderly manner at the last meeting. So do we have, we do, we have people in the chat. Okay, we have Sama Habibi. Hi, Sama.
Hi, Sama Habibi, 8 Mosley Road, Gladstone, New Jersey. I want to just take a minute and thank Mr. Catali for that great presentation in regards to our ELL program. Being an employee in the district, I actually see what a wonderful resource this is. It's amazing when I looked at one of his charts that in 2010 till 11, we had 20 children who were from, you know, a different background. And now in 2019 and 20, we have 140 kids. So this is like amazing for our district that we have such a diverse population. Still very small, but it adds to our diversity. And those are only positive things that I can say. I did want to just quickly make one statement. I am no longer on Facebook. Thankfully, I'm free of that disease, but someone did share a comment or a conversation that was going on in regards to really a gross conversation that continues on about our schools and how our test scores are so low and it's affecting everyone's property values and, you know, boo-hoo-hoo. And I did a little bit of research, and great schools, which comes up, so if you go to Zillow and they actually use the great schools rating system. It's very inconsistent between the other rating system, which I think is pronounced niche. So I just took one school in our district, and I took BMS. BMS in grade schools has a rating of 6 out of 10. But when you look at their academics, it's 7 out of 10. Their test scores is 7 out of 10. Our English is at 75%. The state average is 60%. Our math scores are 56%. The state averages are 41%. Algebra is 84%, and our state averages are 43%. So this is all information that somehow Great Schools has gotten. Now, I also know that they use standardized testing. So we did not have any standardized testing last year, which was the 1920 school year. So I'm only imagining that they're probably using test scores from 2 to 3 years back to make these ratings. So I'm not really sure why anyone, including the real estate market, depends on these silly scores. Number 2, niche is completely the opposite. I looked at BMS again, and they have an A rating, A- in academics, A in teachers, and B+ in diversity. 75% is proficient in reading, and 62% is proficient in math. So I'm just kind of wishing that people really would stop these ridiculous conversations on the bubble. It gets you nowhere. And you know, if you have a question, come to these meetings. This presentation that Mr. Catali provided today was absolutely wonderful, and it shows you what this district is doing to get our kids to where they need to be. I personally did not move to Basking Ridge for the reason that I don't want my kids in Basking Ridge. Those kids are stressed and over, you know, totally pushed to their limits with academics. But Bernardsville, the Somerset Hill School District, has a great balance when it comes to academics and sports and other life options. So I just have to say this because it's been like really, it's been killing me. So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I see we have a comment or question from Eddie Berman.
Hi, I'm Eddie Berman, 502 Timberbrook Drive, Bedminster, New Jersey. I wanted to talk about some of the online software that a school just sent a letter about, GoGuardian specifically. They said that they would only be administering it on school devices. However, after checking my Chrome browser, I noticed that it was synced to mine, and many of my friends had noticed the same thing, even though they don't use school devices, which people are concerning that's an invasion of our privacy. It's also a little concerning that they said they would only be using it as an ad blocker, but we recently got an order from Dr. Nigel that they were going to try and find a way to enforce us to stay during the instructional support time. So it's kind of alerting that they have the potential to do something concerning logging our entire internet activity. So I was hoping that the Board of Ed could offer some greater clarification as to what powers you have with this new software that is being.
Eddie, I'll jump in here. Certainly, I'm not sure about your conversation with Dr. Nigel. I know our IT manager sent out an alert today. Go Guardian is a bundled package, and there are different pieces to it. The only piece that we were really interested in was this content filtering piece. K-8, we had a one-to-one initiative, so our students have Chromebooks that we've given them, and those were the devices that we were interested in filtering. I am not a tech expert. My understanding is that Go Guardian is an extension that comes through this web browser that's somehow tied to your student account, but it is not filtering you. We are not tracking any data on anybody who is using their own device. I understand that it can look a little different on a Mac than it can on a PC. But certainly I am working with Jeremy Slockbauer, our IT tech manager. I do believe he has to get some additional information out to kids and parents, especially in the high school, because I think there's some confusion around what is out there and what we are using it for. But I assure you that it is not to track any of your movement if you are using your own device. I hope that helped.
Yeah, it helps a little bit. I was just concerned that it was on, they promised it would be on school-only devices, but hasn't been the case.
And it is not, it doesn't sit on a device. It's linked to an account. And I believe that it is a matter of showing up on that account, but it is not actively filtering anything. And again, you probably know more about the way this works tech-wise than I do, but I do believe that Mr. Slockbauer has to clarify some things for you, your friends, and some parents in the high school who I know have similar concerns. All I can tell you is that from, he is telling me, first of all, we are only using the content filtering aspect, and it is not configured to monitor or filter any activity on personal devices.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have him follow up with you tomorrow directly to Eddie.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Do we have any other public questions or comments on actionable agenda items? Okay, if we do not, we can move for the approval of the minutes from last month. Jenny? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from
I make a motion to approve the minutes, Janice.
Second?
I'll second, Jamie. It's Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay. Roll call?
Yep. Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Nathans,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tover,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Mrs. Rye,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lees.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, Bob, finance report.
Okay, the Finance Committee met last Wednesday, October the 14th, for an hour and 10 minutes. Everyone was there except Tim McDonald, who was absent, and we also had we had Jim Finn of Brown & Brown Insurance Consultant along with us there that evening. We talked about four items, and I'll go over them real quickly, spend more time on one. The first item was refunding of the bond ordinance, which we're going to vote on the agenda, and that was explained by our consultants. We also talked about how we're going to handle reduction in state aid. You remember last spring, the governor took $130 $76,000 away from us, and we had to figure out a way to fill that gap. Well, we've just finished the audit of the last school year, and the auditors have come up with, there's some extra money we have left over from the school year that just closed because our buildings were closed. We didn't spend enough, we didn't spend all the money we normally would on electricity, gas, and things like that when a building is shut down. So we have enough money to fill that hole. So there's a resolution on the agenda tonight to approve that method so we don't have to cut either personnel or other items we were going to spend on the budget. We talked about the custodial substitution rates, and you'll see there's also a resolution on the agenda to increase the rate from $13 an hour to $16 an hour for custodian who are subs. And that was done on the basis the administration found that we were having a very difficult time getting substitute subs in this COVID environment. And so this we're raising it up to get better access to people to do the job. So that's what this is for. And the last thing we talked about, which is the most complicated, and I'll try to give people an explanation about what Chapter 44 is for healthcare. The state passed a law that says under Chapter 44 is all new employees who started on July 1 going forward have to go to this educator's health plan, either with the state plan or with a private plan. So we went out to bids to get the costs to do that. And when we were doing that, we also asked our insurance broker to get quotes for the current 3 plans that we have, and also get other quotes. Well, he came back with great news. Our current plan, which is Aetna, will be a -6% starting in January. And he did get a quote from Horizon for -7.5, but the board felt, not the board, the committee felt that we'd rather stick with the current carrier and not switch carriers again. We didn't have very good experience with Horizon. We switched from them, I think 6 or 7 years ago. So even though we could save a little money more, we decided not to do that. So by switching, if everybody was in the same plan on January 1 with these new rates from Aetna, we would save $352,000. Now, 18 employees we know have to migrate over to this educator's health plan, and that will save those people a lot of out-of-pocket money for their contributions. But the premium on that is dropping too. So right now we don't know what the effect is going to be for the board. We're going to save over $300,000, but we're also going to, by that savings, the employees are going to pay less in their contribution because it's based on premium. The employees who go to the educator health plan are based on salary. So it's very complicated. We won't know until the open enrollment, which we're going through right now, is finished in December, where the business administrator and our consultant can look at who's migrated over to the new plan and what the new employee contributions are and what the new premiums are. But I've run my own numbers real quick, and I think we're going to be revenue neutral. I don't think we're going to be, it could be 20,000 this way, maybe 30,000 in our favor on the swap over. But as a whole, we're going to save more money because our experience rating for our healthcare has improved. So we're going to get a 6% across the board, and so we're going to walk away from this in a really nice place, I think. And we decided to switch because we had to migrate everybody as a new employee to January 1. We decided to migrate everybody over to a new policy year starting January 1. So every employee has to affirm what they want. They can't just ignore. They have to say they want to stay in the existing plan or they want to switch plans. So they're going to do that. And then in July, there'll be a fifth plan added to our menu, which is the Garden State Educators Health Plan, which will be in network from New Jersey providers only, which it will have a premium even less. So nobody will be forced into that fifth plan, but they can elect into it. And Brown & Brown has a tool online that you can go in and look at your current plan and what your contribution rates are, and if you switch to these other plans. So now every employee has 4 plans they can pick from, except for the new employees. So you got to remember that if you're new employees, you only have 1 choice. If you're an existing employee, you've got 4 choices, and you will have 5 choices in July. I could talk a lot more about this. I think it's great. I think it's going to save the board and the employees a lot of money going forward. So that's the end of my report, and I'd like to move action items 1 through 17. Do I have a second?
Second, Janice.
Any questions on all that stuff? Nobody has any questions. Great. All right, we'll do a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Nathans,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tober,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Mrs. Rye,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lees.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, Bob, you can move on to facilities and operations.
The Facilities and Operations Committee met last Wednesday, and everybody was there except for Tim McDonald, and we only met for 20 minutes. It was our shortest meetings we've had in a long time. We discussed just 2 items. One was the installation of the emergency generator at Bedwell, and that started, and it will come in under the budgeted amount, and it should be done by Thanksgiving if everything goes as projected. So that will now mean all 3 schools will have emergency backup electrical generation capacity for those disasters that could happen in the future. We also discussed about the pros and cons of having board meetings in person or in a virtual aspect. And we went around and around talking about pros and cons. And I think one thing I know, Jamie Lees talked about it in the beginning of the meeting, but it also gives anybody who is sick or if you need to quarantine because you were exposed to somebody with COVID from contract tracing, or you have it yourself, you could attend the meeting. It also gives the public a huge opportunity to tell us how things are going, which is important during the times that we're going through. And it also allows people to come to our meeting who normally have their kids going to school virtually. We have still that segment of parents have kids staying home. And so to accommodate them, I think it's only fair that we do it this way. It allows everybody to have an easy access to our meeting. And until the governor allows more people in a room, we must be able to provide 50 people in the room. That's the criteria that I learned about these last couple of days in a law that was passed about virtual meetings. You must be able to provide 50 people if you're going to meet in person, and we cannot do that at the moment. So that's the new law. So that's what we talked about, and I'm going to move action items 1 through 3. Do I have a second?
Second, Nicole.
Okay, any questions on what we discussed?
Bob, I just wanted to jump in and clarify that the action item number 1 is something that happens biannually In the second half of last year at the high school, we had 4 instances, and in the middle school, we had 4 as well. Those were not all, I know it's called violence and vandalism, but it also includes harassment, intimidation, and bullying instances, as well as substances.
Right, right, okay. Thank you for that, okay. If there's no questions, we'll take a roll call on action items 1 through 3.
Okay, Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Nathans,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tober,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Mrs. Rye,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lees.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
motion carries.
thank you. Thank you, Bob. Janice, curriculum, please.
Okay, the
Oh,
curriculum.
by the way, I do see a comment in the chat, and we will get back to those in our next public comment section. I'm not going to interrupt the committee reports at this time. Thank you, Janice.
Okay, the curriculum committee met on October 13th. Everyone on the committee was present. We met for 2 hours. And the first thing we talked about, and we made a decision, although I'm not sure if this decision is exactly what we intended it to be. So Gretchen, you can clarify this. We decided that going forward, the meeting times for curriculum and policy and personnel would be flipped on a monthly basis. So Gretchen, you'll have to clarify that.
That is accurate. The meetings are currently back-to-back, one starting at 9, one starting at 11. And we agreed that for the group, it worked better to have them one month take place at one time and then the next month flip them.
Okay, thank you. After that, Olga Edgerton came to our meeting and she walked the committee through our new K5I Ready Math program. iReady is a comprehensive assessment and instruction program that connects diagnostic assessments and personalized instruction, facilitating individualized and differentiated math programming. After students are assessed, the program provides clear reports with actionable data that helps give teachers a better understanding of students' strengths, areas of need, and levels of proficiency. The diagnostic data are also used to guide online tailored instruction and practice that students can work through at their own pace. These individualized lessons meet students where they are in their learning. It supports students requiring additional help, preparing students for the next step in their learning, and challenging above-level students with new material. It also supports teachers with resources to facilitate teachers, individuals, small groups, and the entire class. This program could be used to inform and support parents as well. We would like to leverage the iReady program in grades 6 through 8. Currently, in grades 6 through 8, it is being used for support for special education students. The program benefits teachers, students, and potentially parents. Olga also alerted the committee to a potential costly trend in grade school and high school textbook publishing. Previously, publishing companies would sell textbooks and licenses for users to access online resources for a set period of time, for instance, 6 years, after which districts had the option to renew the online resources for a set period of time, say 6 years. Excuse me. And they could renew the licenses for a small fee, about $10 per user per year. However, in recent years, this fee has increased dramatically to $35 or $40 per student per user per year. Because many textbooks in our curriculum have already been used for 6+ years, we need to be cognizant of textbook costs over time and plan accordingly. We talked about creating a master plan for textbook purchases over time, so we wouldn't be hit all at once with these costs. The other thing we talked about, actually Colleen updated the committee on professional development. There are 3 ways to support teachers through to professional development. Courses taken where teachers get paid or can move up on the salary guide. 6 staff development half days, which are 2 hours each and are beginning in January, and through Monday faculty meetings. So I'd like to move items 1 through 3 on the agenda and item 2 on the addendum. And do I have any questions?
That's item 2, J and K, just to be specific, right?
Yes, on the addendum?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so if there are no questions, we could take a roll call.
I just wanted to interject one thing really quickly, Janice. I wanted to explain, again, you'll see number 3 on the agenda is the school self-assessment once a year. Each school across the state has to go through an exercise to self-assess according to the guidelines of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. There are a possible number of total points of 78, and all 3 of our schools scored between 72 and 74. Looks at things like training for teachers, how programs are implemented, and those scores are publicly available and posted on the website. Thanks.
I'd like to comment too, just on the iReady Math program. The curriculum committee, we were so impressed, for those of you who haven't seen that yet, and hopefully at some point Dr. Edgerton can demonstrate it all for the whole board, but that it's such a powerful program because it can really assess what kids are missing and give them tools to work on those specific skills. It just gives so much information. We were really impressed and excited about how this is going to help our whole math program really from the bottom up. So kudos to Dr. Edgerton for finding that and recommending it. And that's one of our big initiatives this year. So we're excited about it.
Okay, I didn't hear a second.
I'll second, it's Nicole.
Thank you. Okay, ready for a roll call? Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Heather. Personnel.
Okay. Policy and personnel met on October 13th at 11 o'clock and all members were present. We received our monthly update on personnel matters from Dr. Dempsey. We discussed staff absences and how where staff is absent or on leave for COVID related or any reason, we need substitutes, leave replacement, or staff overloads. In these cases, we are paying for more than one person to fill a single position, and this is obviously affecting our budget. The impact of this, we won't be able to fully quantify until the end of this year. Mrs. Butler gave us an update on how administration is supporting teachers. This is predominantly being done through the Professional Development Institute, professional development days, and Monday staff meetings. We discussed that this is a difficult environment for teachers and that the board and administration recognizes this. Additionally, we recognize and applaud and are thankful for all the effort they are putting into the education of all of our children. We would like to continue to support all our staff as the district navigates through the pandemic. We discussed retirements and how they are publicly recognized. We recognized retirees at the end of last year. However, for staff members retiring from July on, we will recognize them at all of our December board meeting. We will recognize them at our December board meeting, where we will say some words about each person and celebrate their retirements. Moving forward in 2021, we will do retirements on a monthly basis in the same manner. And I think, Janice, you mentioned this, we agreed to flip the time of PMP with curriculum every other month. So, Jenny, do you have any revisions to read for personnel?
Yes, I have one. Number 4, item A, the start date should read October 1st, 2020, and the end date should read December 18th, 2020. And that's it.
Okay, so I would like to move items 1 through 9 on the agenda and numbers 4, 8, 10, 11, and 12 on the agenda and Ginny's revisions.
I second.
Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion on personnel?
Okay. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald? Mr. McDonald? I don't know if he left.
Uh-oh, did we lose him?
I think so. I don't see him anymore. Okay.
Okay.
Miss Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Miss Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. We can move on to policy, Heather.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to take a moment, like I do every once in a while, to refresh people on how we pass policy. Any given policy, at which time the public has the opportunity to comment, as well as any board members that might have questions. After that, if there's nothing that needs to be revised, we move it into second reading in the next public meeting the next month. Once it's in second reading, again, everybody on the board has an opportunity to comment, as well as the public. And if there's any work that needs to be done, it would be referred back to committee. If not, the policy is then voted on, and if it's passed at that point, it is the updated policy or the new policy. So to that end, in policy, we reviewed the Strauss-Esme mandated updates, and those are the policies in first reading tonight are policy 1620, administrative employment contracts, policy and regulation 2431, athletic competition, and regulation 2431.1, emergency procedures for sports and other athletic activity, policy 2451, adult high school, policy 2464, gifted and talented students, and policy and regulations 5330.05, seizure action plan. The policies in second reading for this evening are Policy and Regulation 5111, eligibility of resident and non-resident students, and Policy and Regulation 5200, attendance, and Policy 7510, use of school facilities. Okay. The committee recommends the passing of all the policies and regulations in first and second reading. I'm going to move items 1 and 2 on the agenda.
I'll second Heather.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Hi, Heather. I just wanted to, well, first, I recognize that all of the items that we have in first, and I believe that, well, first and almost all in second reading are mandated policy updates that we are required to adopt. There was just some wording in the emergency procedures for sports regulation under precautions number 2, the language. I just wanted to make sure that as we are moving this to second reading and adopting it, that we will making sure that we adhere to all of the language put forth in that policy. So I just wanted to, confirm that as we move forward, that all of that will be reviewed and implemented appropriately.
Yes, Sam, we typically have any policies that are specific to areas we pass along, and admin certainly once that is a formally adopted board policy, we will ensure that it is followed.
Thank you.
Anything else?
There's a public comment on this eligibility policy. I see Mr. Crooks. I don't know if you have something to say about that now.
Yes, I was on here last week and they passed over it. I'd just like to know what the eligibility enrollment is exactly in plain English.
It wasn't, well, I just want to correct, it wasn't passed over. It went through first reading, and tonight it's in second reading, and that's the procedure.
I understand that, but has it been talked about in this forum, in the public forum? What is it? What is the official?
You want me to speak to the change that occurred in that policy and regulation? According to Strauss Esme, which is the service that we use to ensure that any statutes are that change are reflected in our policy. They indicate that the policy is changing because it statute now indicates a school district may not condition student enrollment on the fact that New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission does not have the name or address of a parent on file. Apparently, you can still go to motor vehicles to verify eligibility. But if they do not have any information on a parent, lack of information cannot be used to determine if a parent is ineligible for enrollment. In addition, they had received requests for guidance about students who came into the country on J1 visas. The board will remember that we have had international students who have been living with families under AFS program, and the board had voted, I believe it was twice recently, to allow those students to attend school, but there was no specific language in the policy that spoke to that, which it now contains.
I'm familiar with that. I just wanted to know what the official policy was as far as residency within the district.
It is as outlined in the policy. It has not changed substantially since you were at our board meeting. I want to say that was last winter, right, Mr. Crooks? Something maybe, yeah. And certainly the board attorney is here if you have specific questions about that.
My question again is that are there children in the school enrolled that do not have legal residency within the district? That was my question then, and isn't it still now?
Can I interrupt for a second? Jamie, should we move this to public comment section so we can finish the agenda items?
Yeah, I think so, because this is a mandated policy that we're passing. It's not like it's a policy that we can, and maybe Mr. Crooks can meanwhile go online and read the policy.
I did read the policy. I read it the last time I was there. I just wanted to make sure the policy was being followed by the district. And my other comment was,
We're following the law, Mr. Crooks. I think our attorney would attest to that's what we need to do, is follow the law.
okay, then I'll ask the attorney, do we have any children in our enrollment that are not eligible under the enrollment rules?
I would just like to once again, Mr. Crooks, just respectfully ask this to be moved to public comment so we can finish the board business.
That's fine.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion from the board on policy? Shall we do a roll call, Ginny?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Sorry about the last vote. My computer crashed, but yes.
that's okay. Ms. Nathans,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mr. Tober,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Mrs. Rye, Mrs. Lees.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, community relations, Kathy, please.
Sorry, I had to get unmuted. Thanks, Jamie. So the Community Relations Committee met on October 15th at 4 p.m. for about 2 hours with all the board members in attendance. We were also really happy to have our administrators, Dr. Dempsey and Mrs. Butler, join our meeting as well. The meeting agenda items included the appropriate forum for future BOE meetings, an update on professional development for staff, and lastly, best practices and lessons learned around communications with the public. As already mentioned in other committee reports, we had a long dialogue around the forum for future BOE meetings, and we agreed, after discussing the many pros and cons, that holding Zoom meetings in the near term so that a consistent forum, structure, and rhythm can be achieved would be best. Again, as took place in other committee meetings, Mrs. Butler updated us on the plan for staff professional development. This discussion really morphed into numerous comments around staff recognition, and I just wanted to take a minute here to say that the BOE recognizes that these aren't easy times and that we truly support the efforts of our district staff. We appreciate the efforts of each and every teacher, administrator, and all other staff members who we know work tirelessly to keep the district up and running and keep reinventing ways to keep students engaged and learning in this new model. We do understand that these aren't easy times, and we really want you to know that we support you and we do appreciate you. The next topic that we discussed in committee, and I'll say we discussed it at great length, was around best practices and lessons learned during COVID with respect to communicating with the public. It was recognized that the approach taken by the administrators was to always communicate what was known at the time and not overpromise to anyone. Although at the beginning of the summer, people may have felt that they needed more communication, it is believed that this was really more information and answers that they were looking for and really wanting. By the start of the school, people seemed appreciative of the very purposeful and accurate updates that had been shared along the way by our district administrators. It was also noted that the resources for 2020 banner that you probably have seen on the district website proved to be a really useful tool as it contained an archive of all the communications that were sent to the community and could always be looked up again if things needed to be confirmed. And it also demonstrated a consistent communication pattern and plan. Lastly, we agreed within committee that the action item of executing on the communication plan that was discussed in the spring would be put on hold as other priority items are really being addressed in this new environment in which we live. So I have no items to move that at this time, but happy to answer any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, time for supplementary matters. I would just like to mention that to the public that this is the week New Jersey School Boards Conference is taking place, and unfortunately, for those of us who usually go, it's virtual this year, taking place right now, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and many of us are attending training sessions, and I didn't know if any board members wanted to share anything that they've seen so far. We have another full day tomorrow, but I know many of you and myself are taking some of these training sessions. We always learn things.
Jamie, I just wanted to say it was pretty timely that Michael Catelli gave his presentation tonight on ESL. I attended 2 programs regarding supporting our English language learners generally and in this current environment that we're living through. And as he indicated in his presentation, obviously the idea behind this program is to always strive to morph into what our students need and what they want and how to best serve that. And from what I got in these presentations, I think that we really are working very hard towards providing what is, you know, very current and a lot of the philosophy that is being talked about based on the presentations that I went to. So I just thought it was very timely that that presentation came up, that, you know, it's a big part of our community. And I, you know, I wanted to applaud the efforts based on what I've learned.
Yeah, he did a really good job with that. Anybody else want to share
I
anything?
just want to mention one thing. I listened to one of the webinars I listened to was on the legislation, and almost all of the members that spoke mentioned that it's a tough year, and that they all mentioned about the social, emotional, you know, the social interaction that kids are usually used to, and that it's very difficult for students and teachers alike because it's much better to teach when everybody's there present in the flesh. But they did go back to that a couple of times. So I thought I would just mention that, and how really everybody's working very hard, and to be supportive and recognize teachers and students would be very appropriate.
Thanks, Janice. Okay, does anyone on the board have any other supplementary matters that they would like to bring up?
Yeah, I just wanted to see maybe Ginny or Gretchen, if you could give us an update on how things are going with transportation. I know that was a huge key to getting everybody back to school, and I just wanted to see, you know, in general, how everything is working out, and, you know, what your perspective is on how everything's going with that.
I'm going to let Ginny address that, and I can certainly jump in, Ginny, if you need me.
Great. Well, I won't lie to you. Transportation has been very tough this year, along with all other aspects of the reopening plan. We had a rough start with going out to bid for a new contractor, which was unexpected. And it continues to be a challenging addressing all the transportation issue, because there's constant changes with the school schedules, both with our school and with out of district schools. So as we add groups to in-person instruction, or out of district schools have their own individual schedules that we coordinate with Somerset County ESC, it's been quite a challenge. Typically what happens is we set these routes and bus stops at the beginning of the school year before school starts. And then the first 2 weeks is where we work out the kinks and finalize the stops and fine tune our routes. This year, it seems that every week is like a first week of school, because there's changes that are constantly happening. which is a good thing. That means we're evolving into a more typical schedule. However, our department's been doing great trying to accommodate everything. And I think so far so good. That doesn't mean that we haven't had, our share of complaints, which we have, but I think we've addressed all of them in a timely manner. And our buses continue to get cleaned and disinfected on a regular basis, as we have outlined in our guidelines. And this week, we've completed all of our bus evacuation drills for all 3 schools, which you approved on the agenda tonight. And we're also getting trained on the Traversa 360, which is an add-on to our transportation software that allows us to use a GPS system for the buses. Once the training is complete, we're looking into testing with our pilot group sometime this year. And another thing we're addressing this year is looking at our hazardous routes and trying to work with the municipalities and the police department to finalize a list that, I think it's been some time hasn't been updated, and it's our goal to have that completed this year as well. So fingers crossed, so far so good. Kids are getting to school, and that's about it right now.
Well, I imagine that the buses might be a little bit quieter this year with so few students, on each one. But thank you for that update. I appreciate it. Because again, I know transportation was such a huge piece of being able to reopen the school. So,
well, and kudos to Ginny for coming in and, having been here for a couple of weeks saying the company that was supposed to provide those buses just kind of bailed on us. So she really scrambled. There was a little bit of sweat back there at the end of August, but she came through for us. So thank you for that.
And thanks for the update. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other supplemental matters? Okay, if not, we can go back to public questions and comments. Mr. Crooks, I just want to say, I know we gave you quite some time in the winter explaining our residence checks process, which we still use. I'm not really sure what you're looking for here.
I'm just following up to find out. I asked a simple question of the lawyer. Are we sure that 100% of our students that are enrolled in our schools are enrolled under the eligibility rules? And the other thing I would mention is, and this is a comment, and I don't expect a response from the board, but my thinking is the board comfortable and satisfied with the rankings and the ratings that the schools are now getting? And I'm totally with you on standardized testing. I hate it. I have 5 children, 3 of them have learning challenges. But the point of the matter is, as Mr. Bibby said earlier, if you love the school the way it is right now, you don't mind that the rankings are down, well, that's important for everybody to know. And I think the board should be public, because obviously the mayor went public as if it was a good thing that we have dropped down in the rankings. Forget about the property values. That's not important to me. It's the education of our kids. So that's my comment, and that's my question still to the lawyer. Are we sure that we only have kids in the classrooms that are legally eligible to be there?
So, good evening. I don't verify the children's residence or addresses, but I am assured by the administration that I've seen the documentation that they request. They request the appropriate documentation to prove residency and eligibility to be in the district. When students move from one school to another, they have to provide they have to provide the evidence again. And when leases expire, they keep track of when leases are going to expire for those people that are renting. The parents also parents or guardians have to provide additional evidence that they have a new lease. So it's a constant monitoring of children. Is it possible that somebody may not be a resident? I suppose that's a possibility, but certainly the district is doing everything it can to make sure that it verifies all of the addresses and that children who are in the school district reside and are eligible to attend school here.
And I appreciate your efforts in that. And I had asked the last time that cross-referencing of data with the building authorities in Bernardsville. Is that happening or not?
So I can tell you that this, Mr. Crooks, the school district is not permitted to determine whether or not a child is eligible to attend school based on whether that child is living with another family or whether there are several families living in one building. They can't cross-reference data with the municipality. We're only allowed to, the school district is only allowed to verify that the parent that the child is living with the parent or with a guardian, and that they're living in the municipality. But we are not allowed to cross-check information to see if several families are living in one house, for example.
Okay, so there are two sets of data that can't be cross-referenced, but if you speak to somebody from the building authority, they will tell you that indeed this is happening.
And so then that's the responsibility of the building authority to do whatever they need to do in terms of housing code and residency codes with the municipality.
If they gave you a list of students that are enrolled in your schools that should not be, what would you do then?
If they're giving us a list of children that are if several families are living in one apartment, for example.
Right.
And the apartment is supposed to be for one family only, but there's two families living in there. I'm just going to use that as a simple example. The school district cannot remove the children from its roles because those children are living in the town. So they're eligible. It's up to the housing authority to deal with whatever housing violations there are.
That's a disorderly person's conduct. So therefore, we don't know as a school system if we have children enrolled in the system that are not legally eligible. That's your answer, correct?
No, that is not my answer, sir. You're misunderstanding. Perhaps I'm not explaining myself. If there are two families living in an apartment and that apartment is only supposed to house one family.
Right.
If the district has evidence that those children live in the apartment and we have to accept them, we're legally required to accept them in school. We cannot say, Donald Crooks, you have two other families living in your house and that house is only zoned for a one family. The school district is not allowed to interfere in that. If there is any issue with that, it's the municipality has to be the one to address that in terms of housing code. But if the children are living in town, whether they're living in a one-family house or an apartment with several other families or in an apartment alone with only one family, the school district is required to educate them.
And the board is comfortable with that interpretation?
That's the law.
See, the policy that we passed tonight, the state mandated policy that we passed tonight, reads this: a student's eligibility to attend this school shall not be affected by the physical condition of an applicant's housing or his or her compliance with local housing ordinances or terms of lease. You're in the wrong public meeting if you have an issue with stacked housing. That's all I'm going to say. And
I understand that entirely, but I do
talk about school ratings, but you've had more than your fair share of time here, and we may have other people that would like to make comments.
Thank you very much. You've answered none of my questions. Thank you.
I saw a comment from Sama again in the meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Crooks, you need to contact Chad McQueen. He is a council member in Bernardsville, and he can help you with housing, property maintenance, zoning, and so on and so forth. This is not a school board issue. You clearly seem like you have an issue with this in one of your op-eds when you said if your grandchildren get COVID from a student who doesn't belong in this district, that you will sue the school district. You have an issue with this, and you need to take it out of the school board. You need to go to the town council and deal with this.
I also would like to just say,
excuse me, now you're making a personal issue with me. Okay, I've been living here for 35 years and I pay my taxes all the time. All I care about is what is legal and what is correct and what is right. I have met with the building council. They
Mr.
told me
Crooks, this is, Mr. Crooks, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is, it's public comment, it's not a debate.
I also would like to say everybody here on the school board and the administrators on that are here tonight, and all administrators and teachers, we all care about student achievement. Of course, certainly I can speak for the board. That's our primary goal, is to have solid learning and student achievement, which is always one of our goals. The things that we do and that we've talked about in this meeting tonight are to that end. And for instance, adopting this new K-5 math program, these things take time to go into effect. So everything we do and all the curriculum and things that we look at are for student achievement. I just wanted to make that clear. What's happening?
Jamie, there's another comment from John Tober.
Okay, thanks. I sort of didn't hear anything from anybody. Hi, John.
Hi, I'm John Tober. I'm a freshman at BHS. So as we know, athletic events and sports have been able to meet 6 days a week in person. My question is that if athletic events and sports are allowed to meet in person, how come extracurricular activities and other school activities aren't allowed to meet in person as well?
That's a good question, John.
Jamie, are you comfortable with me responding?
Sure.
Hey, John. So I think, you bring up an interesting point. We certainly put that guidance in place as part of our reopening plan. At that point in time, we did not know that sports were necessarily going to be running as robustly as they are now. I think our thought was that most clubs, if you will, could meet as effectively through virtual mechanisms as could, but certainly feel that's not true for, or you want to have that conversation, I encourage you to reach out to Dr. Nigel and talk to him about that. I don't know that rule is set in stone. We could certainly revisit it.
You good, John?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christine Albanese-Demare, I see you in there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Christine Albanese-Demare. I teach at the high school. I just wanted to bring up a topic that is coming in the future so that we can be proactive and, address things ahead of time. But the holidays are coming. Thanksgiving is going to be here before we know it. And I know a lot of people travel. Thanksgiving's like the busiest travel holiday of the year. And this year, I'm sure some people will change their gatherings, but some people will also welcome family members from other areas or go see family members from other areas. And I just have a concern that all of the movement and travel that happens with the holidays could potentially have some negative consequences. So I just wanted to bring it up so that the board and the admin can talk about the holidays and can talk about safety in advance so that, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, we're not sort of caught by surprise and doing things at the last minute. I know nobody wants to be fully virtual, but I think maybe just bringing it up and having those conversations about what might be necessary, I think is an important thing to be proactive and looking ahead for. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. We are certainly, and I apologize, we have not communicated anything out yet, but I've been in touch with Lynn Weltler. Certainly, Derlise and I have spent a fair amount of the last week talking about this issue. I have spoken to Lucy Forgione. I've spoken to Dr. Agathis. I've spoken to the other superintendents in the county. We are all aware of the fact that the holidays are coming. Teachers' Convention is certainly viewed by many as a time to travel as well. And we are looking at how to ensure safety to the greatest degree practical, knowing that we are trying to provide our students with in-person instruction, and that families do have choices to make, and that it is going to be a balancing act of sorts. So what I can promise you is that something will go out within the next week. What I can't say definitively at this moment in time is exactly what those details will be, because there's a lot of moving pieces at this point.
And thank you for that. And I just wanted to mention that anything that would be done in this regard would be an administrative decision. This would not be something that would involve a board vote, just to be clear. Okay, any other public comments? And if there are none, could I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah,
I know. I'm ready, Tim.
And Janice, second. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.